Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from us here, the organizers of today's public webinar, the Lutheran World Federation, Evangelical Church of Augsburg Confession in Austria, and the Augsburg Lutheran Seminary, Mexico. I'd like to welcome you to this public webinar entitled Echoing Miriam's Song, Women Doing Public Theology Today. I am Reverend Dr. Sivin Kit, Program Executive for Public Theology and Interreligious Relations from the LWF. I'm very happy to moderate today's theological discussion, theological conversation. Now, this month of March has been very much focused on women's rights, women's contributions, and women's leadership in different areas in the church, religious communities, and society in general. Now, today we would like to invite you to allow our guests to, if I may say, interrupt the flow of political exchange in the public sphere to offer a new imaginative interpretations of the present and alternative visions of the future. This is by the Norwegian theologian Trejo that inspired me to think about that. Now, the aim is to hear from their voices and to help us to reflect, what does it mean to do public theology, or what does it mean for women to do public theology today? I'm really happy to first introduce our speaker so that she may begin to give us the opening remarks. Reverend Dr. Angela Trejo Haager. She's the director and professor in Feminist Biblical Hermeneutics, Augsburg Lutheran Seminary, Mexico. So it's very early in the morning. Thank you for joining us. And she will give us the opening remarks based on our title, Echoing Miriam's Song, to frame our conversation today. Now, Angela will speak in Spanish. It's the language of her heart, but we will also convey her message in the text in the chat box so that for those of you who don't know Spanish can follow it there. So over to you, Angela, to share with us your thoughts.
Muchas gracias, Sivin. Hola, buen día a todas y todos. Es un placer estar en este espacio. Como directora del Seminario Luterano Augsburgo en la Ciudad de México, me complazco en unirme a la voz de las mujeres que hablan profecía esperanzadora para este tiempo complicado. Miriam, la hermana de Moisés, es una adolescente que está resguardando la vida de su hermano, quien flota en el agua dentro de una cesta. Se gesta en ella el deseo de luchar ante un gobierno egipcio opresor, una voz violenta que ha dado la orden de matar. Cuando la hija del faraón encuentra al bebé, Miriam se presenta desde su corporalidad pequeña, como el enlace entre dos culturas, dos pueblos, con toda la capacidad de dialogar y proponer alternativas para proteger la vida de su hermanito. Hay una voz clara y profunda desde el pueblo dominado. Su canto es tierno, pero al mismo tiempo construyendo el camino para la paz y la tranquilidad no solo de su hermano, sino de muchos niños en peligro de muerte. Con el tiempo, su voz es liderazgo dentro del pueblo hebreo, quienes al huir de tierras egipcias cruzan el Mar Rojo y al verse a salvo, entonan junto con todas y todos un hermoso canto en el cual se recupera la memoria histórica y se reconoce el favor de Dios. La profetisa Miriam, entonces, canta más fuerte y baila con todas las mujeres celebrando la liberación. Los cuerpos liberados de violencias, de cargas pesadas, cuerpos de mujeres entonando una melodía corporal denunciando los dolores y las injusticias hacia ellas. La expresión de sus cuerpos liberados ahora anuncian la esperanza. Transmiten notas musicales de justicia y escriben en el viento y en el agua un pentagrama que hace eco de un mundo mejor para ellas también. Éxodo 15 Es el eco de un canto firme que no se puede detener, ya que la brisa y el agua la han traído hasta el día de hoy, a nuestras casas y a nuestras vidas mismas. Nos invita a bailar y a cantar notas en fa y en mi para combinarlas y seguir pidiendo justicia a favor de las mujeres de nuestros países. Nosotras seguimos cantando y en el Nuevo Testamento encontramos a otra María, quien tras la noticia de que sería madre de Jesús, emprende una danza hasta el encuentro con su prima Elizabeth. Y el texto en el Evangelio de Lucas nos comunica que el bebé de Elizabeth salta en su vientre de gozo, es decir, danza en el agua de vida dentro de su madre. María se regocija y entona una melodía de denuncia también, pues reconoce que hay poderosos que destruyen a los más débiles y está segura que ese Dios en quien ella confía será justo para con ella y con todos los que sufren. ¿Cuál sería el tono de la voz de María? No lo sabemos, pero estoy segura que era una voz que retumbó en los oídos de muchas mujeres que se unieron a su danza para expresar la injusticia que se sufría por el Imperio Romano. Agua, canto y baile, el agua del río, del mar y de una matriz que creaba vida. Una matriz desde donde brotarían aguas para el nacimiento de Jesús. Agua, canto y baile, espacios de resistencia y de voz melodiosa. Agua, muerte, agua, vida, opresión y silencio, canto y baile. Transformación y renovación que nos invitan hoy a danzar de nuevo y construir melodías que generen paz. La búsqueda de la justicia y la libertad para expresarnos. Eva, Hoyce y Ngui. Somos profetisas del agua y del canto. Hoy estamos atentas para escucharlas. Envuélvanos en sus melodías de esperanza. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Angela, for sharing with us. Thank you for reminding us about transformation and renewal that invites us all to dance again, to build melodies that generate peace and search for justice and freedom to express ourselves. And we will be inspired by our speakers. And for our participants, just to remind you that the text for what Angela shared is in English, and I've posted it there. And I'm sure that she'll be happy to share with you as well. And we will make that available in a follow-up email. So thank you very much, Angela, for coming to share with us. The first speaker that I would like to invite today comes all the way from the Evangelical Church of Augsburg Confession in Austria. She's Reverend Dr. Eva Harasta, Theological Advisor to the Bishop. Now for today, we have decided to use a conversational approach to our webinar rather than merely focused on a lecture presentation. So our speakers come from different contexts, as you will know, and professional locations. And they will be sharing at least just 4 to 5 minutes in the beginning, but we will have a flow of a conversation afterwards. And you are free to continue your questions or your comments in the chat. So Eva, I'd like to just pass this time to you so that you can share with us your opening remarks.
Thank you for inviting me. It is a joy and honor for me to speak to you. And I would like to approach our topic of the public voice of women just from my perspective as a Lutheran pastor in Austria and also as an academic theologian. So maybe my first remarks will be about being a female Austrian Lutheran pastor. 238 pastors work in my little church in Austria, which has about 271,000 members. Of these 238 pastors, 89 are women. So about 37% of all pastors in Austria are women, which does not sound so good, but in comparison to the academic public, the church gender balance is quite okay. It has become quite normal for women to be pastors in Austrian congregations, and they are cherished by their congregations and also acknowledged in their role as an authority, as a theological and pastoral authority. So being a woman pastor in Austria is quite good, so to speak. But once we look towards higher leadership roles, the situation changes a little bit. When you look, I mean, it's a very small diaspora church, but still, maybe this example speaks to you as well. When we look to the middle leadership positions, which we call superintendents, we have 7 dioceses, and all of them are male. All superintendents are men. And this has been the case since 2012, when Louise Müller, who used to be the superintendent from Salzburg and Tyrol, retired. So for about 9 years, of course, there have been a few elections since. Sorry, I was just thrown off by a comment in the chat sections because an Austrian pastor commented that she's happy for me to touch this issue, which is quite touchy in a sense. There have been 4 elections for superintendent, the middle leadership role, and all of them have led to men being elected, which is, I mean, nothing against those men. Yeah? They are all well qualified and will fill the role of middle leadership quite well. But still, it says something about church and the role of women in the church that this has gone in this way. So the public leadership or the public voice of the church remains predominantly male, even though in the pastorate there are quite a few women active. And of course, our bishop is a man, though he is quite firmly convinced of gender justice and has vowed to work towards more gender justice in our church. So this is just the one small Austrian Lutheran church speaking about the gender of the public voice within the church. Now, speaking as an academic Lutheran theologian, well, of course, academia is a predominantly male field, and I left academia because I felt that I had to put down my identity as a woman in order to succeed in German academic theology, especially in the field that I foolishly chose, systematic theology, which is my discipline and maybe my vocation too. But why should this even be a problem, that women's voices are not as much as included in academic theology in the German and Austrian contexts? But I think it is a problem, not only because meeting quotas should be an aim, but rather it is theologically unsound to ignore whole traditions and positions of theology like feminist theology. I was told that writing about feminist theology would be a career poison if I ever wanted to work in a theological department in the German-speaking context. Also, I think this exclusion of women's voices in the theological discourse leads to an exclusion of issues that can be seen, that are ascribed importance. My colleague Esther McIntosh from York University has illustrated this quite strikingly when talking about the exclusion of the issue of domestic violence in public theology, which she connects with the failure to include more women in public theology. And of course, in the German context, the issue of gender justice is a hot topic also in the societal debate. When speaking about gender just language, people get quite emotional. So what would change if women would raise their voices and become more loud in the church public and in the academic public? I would like to just highlight a few issues here. What would change? I think one issue would be to overcome traditional gender roles that have led to oppression of women. Another issue would be a reimagination of the role of ordained ministry by including women. the theology of ministry would change. Also, inclusion and diversity issues would get much more importance. Just 2 points more, Sivin. Also, ecumenical implications. I think if more women were open about raising their voice in the public of the church, ecumenical relations may change a little bit, because it would become quite normal to speak, to promote the ordination of women. And to say it is good, indeed good, to have a woman minister. And it is a discrimination based on gender to not allow women to the public ministry. And lastly, but most importantly, the education issue, by allowing and by taking a gender as a woman in the public field, also theology would change by having more inclusive reading lists, and also maybe some point in the future, if we would be so fierce as Miriam, imagine a theology that may be based in gender justice, and as thus have a freer understanding of the relationship to God, which is not only reserved for men. So what do I say at the end? It is about equality, but it is also about power. And I would like to say that maybe the anger that some women feel and the disappointment by past experiences may be used constructively in order to not sing so harmoniously, but rather maybe, I don't know, I don't want to call for revolution because I'm an Austrian. We are not good at revolutions, but still, sometimes a little disharmony may be more constructive than agreement and harmony.
Thank you, Eva. Excellent. And of course, I didn't want to hurry you, but we will have more time to discuss this afterwards. And maybe others might want to pick it up to share your thoughts about what you heard from Eva as a starting point for our discussion. So thank you very much. The next person, we have to go all the way to Zambia, but she is originally from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania. Now, our next speaker, Reverend Dr. Hoyce Jacob Moby. She's the Limo Moby. She's the Executive Director of Mindolo Ecumenical Foundation, Zambia. And now she comes to bring us another perspective. So over to you, Hoyce.
Thank you very much, Reverend Dr. Sivin and the team in Geneva for this opportunity to share my views about public theology. First of all, I would like to mention that the concept of public in public theology is understood differently by various theologians. So when the term public is not well understood, it simply remains uncertain and can create more confusion. So I would like to start by give working definition. When I talk about public theology, what I mean. For me, public theology is the theology that focuses on subject of public concern. In the simple term, public theology is the theology done by theologian, or maybe someone else, but is about public and for the benefit of the public. And after sharing my working definition, I would like now to share some challenges that face women in doing public theology in Africa. First of all, we have to note that in Africa, we have very few theologians. And the reason for our number to be low in this continent, there are a number of reasons, but I will mention just few. One of it is just skills. Public theology needs someone to be able to do research, and to do research, you need to have research skills. You need to be able to write and analyze articles and analyze issues and maybe write some articles or books, or prepare a speech which you can speak on the public and address issues in the public. But to be able to do all this, you need a very good skills so that instead, you will not confuse the community, you will not confuse the public by just bringing things which you don't know or are not really well researched. And so so lack of clear public theological framework can bring a lot of problem, and most of the theologians who are in Africa, though they are few, but most of them, they are not courageous, they are not able to address issue publicly because they don't have a clear public theological framework on how to do this public theology. So without good research, there is a danger of making an oversimplified responses to particular ethical issues. The questions which can be raised by media, for instance, if you are in the media and you give no or yes answers that can give maybe a short-term benefit of getting some kind of Christian response in the media, but create difficulties in the long term when the complexities of the issue become plain in the other context or in the near future. So lack of good education is one of the things which limit or is acting as a block, or is acting as something which hinder women theologians to do public theology in Africa. Another issue is the church and seminary structures in our continent. Some of the church structures in Africa are restricting women theologians from accessing theological education and also to access the public. There is a reluctance on the part of some churches to send women for theological education, or the reluctance of some of seminaries to admit women as students in their theological college. So there are those women who do not want to start theology because they are not sure of employment opportunity outside their church, as many people still have the perception here in Africa that the theology is only for the ordained priests. So some of the women, they would like to learn about theology, but they are not accepted by the church because some of the churches in Africa, they don't ordain women, and therefore they are not sure if I start theology in the future, what will be. Am I going to be employed or not? Because in Africa, most of the theologians, they are working with the church, they are ordained pastors. So another issue is the love of, I can say, love of power instead of power of love. This is where people struggle for power instead of showing love to the community. They will need to be in the positions, like what was shared before, is that you can see in our church structure until now, those who are holding big positions in the church are men, and women, they are really left aside. So it's like these positions, people, they don't want to share, they don't want to see that a woman can also be a leader. You can find that in most of the churches, like if I give an example of the country where I come from in Tanzania, in the Lutheran church in Tanzania, we do not have any female bishop. All of the bishops in Tanzania in the Lutheran church are men. And that means the decision-making bodies is only men who are sitting there, and very few women who are allowed just to go there to represent the women department here and there. So you can see that the issue of power also is making women theologians not to be given public the public square where they can share what they think about theology and the like. So because of all this, you can find that there are few women studying theology in Africa. When I can give an example, when I was doing my theological studies at Macmillan, I was the only woman in the class. We were 18 of us, and so 17 men, and only me who was a woman. Another issue is cultural challenges. Women are less privileged in most of the African tradition structures. Many women who want to study theology through state universities and may have the approval of their churches, nevertheless fail to meet the entrance qualification because they did not receive a full school education. This is connected to the cultural perception that when family do not have enough money to educate all their children, so priority is given to the boy children because they will grow up to be breadwinners in the future, while the girl children will be married off to men who will support them. So this also is a problem. Moreover, the issue of silence in Africa. Some traditional African cultures are still functioning oppressively with regard to gender. For example, the notion of submission. This is connected to silence, a silence which is rooted in the social cultural setting. So you are not allowed to share much. And even a pastor, a woman theologian, if he speaks much in the public, they will, she might be rejected by the community to be seen as an unnatural person, an unethical person who can just address issues in the public. So in some cases, when women are abused or the abusive action are labeled as an act of discipline them, some of the women theologians, they prefer to be silenced so that they can be accepted by their superior or by their community. So these are the issues which I wanted to share at the beginning, and I hope we'll be able to share more in the near future. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Hoyce, for your in-depth reflections on these issues of silence, power, and submission. And I'm sure we can continue that conversation later with others. So the next person I'd like to invite is Reverend Ngui Ozi, and she is coming all the way from Sabah, Malaysia. And she is the Dean of the English General Council, the Basel Christian Church of Malaysia, and Dean of Students in Sabah Theological Seminary, Malaysia. So over to you, Ozi.
Thank you, Sivin, and thank you, everyone. Thank you for the organizers particularly. Women doing theology in Asia, we are many actually. Of course, at least half of the church is made up of women. And actually, women take up a lot of roles in the church. And we are about, well, leadership-wise, especially in my section, I think the women edge the men over just a little bit. I think we're probably like 52% over the men being 48. I myself, as Dr. Sivin said, I am the Dean of the English section, meaning that I am the spiritual leader of my part of my denomination. Now I have a counterpart. My counterpart is the chairman of the EGC, or the English General Council, and he, of course, is a man. And it's actually a very good partnership. And in my seminary, women in the faculty are about half the faculty. So women doing theology, women doing public theology in Sabah, Malaysia, is very visible. I remember during our Christmas celebration 2 years ago, I sat beside another another pastor who's a lady, and there were many other people on the, in the VIP list who were pastors, and at least half of them are women. So here in my part of the world, it's good to be a woman, and it's good to be a woman doing public theology because you have a platform. You are acknowledged. You are seen as a leader of the church, a leader in the community. You are trusted. You are someone who does. You are someone who teaches the word of God. However, if you come to the top echelon of the church, there's a huge difference. What bothered me very much recently was a few months ago, I attended the top echelon meeting of the Federation of Evangelical Lutheran Churches in Malaysia and Singapore. Now, out of all those who attended, 20 odd people, I'm the only woman. So on the top echelon of the church, there are very few women. So in my own denomination, in the top echelon of my church, I am one of 2 women in the exco. Now, in the seminary, it's different. In the exco, there are 2 men. The principal of my seminary is a man, but the exco is made up of 2 men and 4 women. Now, is this due to culture? Is this due to tradition? However, Asia has had women bishops. They have been elected. They have served very well during their term as bishops. Of course, I'm speaking about Hong Kong. They have had women bishops. Whereas for Malaysia, for Singapore, this part, Southeast Asia, this part of where I am, no, we haven't had a woman elected as bishop yet. So that means that at the very top of the church, or at the very top of where public theology is done, you don't see women. You do see women doing, the next level down. So I'm the next level down because I'm not the bishop. And I really wonder about why. So as I've said, is it due to culture? Is it due to tradition? Recently, these 2 years, we can see that there's a swing. There are more male students in the seminary as compared to female students. Whereas previously, for many, many years, there were more women doing theology in the seminary as compared to men. So this difference, this kind of like imbalance is something that is troubling me. Is it because traditionally men have always taken that role? They've always been put in that role? Or is it because we have, culturally more confidence in a male leader? Do women not lead just as well? Styles and ways of doing theology is of course different between men and women, or between one theologian and the next theologian, actually. So it troubles me and it makes me ponder about why is it that though we have such a great number just below the top echelon, why is it that in the top echelon we don't have equality as far as gender equality goes? And it's of course much more interesting when you have voices from both sexes. It's much more, well, I won't say it's complete. It's much more broad. It's broader. It's much more interesting. There is a lot more to do with details, as well as fleshing out plans and vision. So I really see that it's necessary to have women doing public theology in the top echelon as much as they do theology in all levels of public theology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ozzy. And this is really also reminding us that there's first a kind of public within the church, and of course, extending outside into society. And very often we do find women speaking at different levels, but I think you're reminding us again how important it is not to just restrict certain women to some sections or even certain topics alone. And I think this will definitely bring us, I'd like to just invite all the speakers to return, if they can just start their what do you call it, their video. That's right, that would be very helpful. But let me just allow them to start their videos. So I like to just invite the other speakers to start their videos, Eva and also Hoyce, to come back into our discussion. They have just given us some beginning foods for thought. And now Hoyce and Eva will come. And I'm going to just let you rest a little bit, Ozzy, and let Eva perhaps start first. And they'll be joining us now. Now we have everyone here for this table talk. And, there are some questions that were already mentioned earlier. So for example, there was, and you are quite self-critical about this. Some people from other parts of the world might say that, look, how can you speak about discrimination when you speak from a position of white privilege or European wealth? And there's this stereotype of what doing theology means, even for women doing not only theology, but public theology. And could you speak a little bit to that?
I think this is a very difficult question because it touches upon different strands of discrimination and oppression. And I mean, without being able to give the ultimate response, I think that each and every one of us is responsible to work towards change in their context, but at the same time to remain aware of the challenges in other contexts. And I think, at least I have made the experience. I've had the experience that telling a woman that she should not feel discriminated against because other women have it much worse, this argument can be used against equality, against gender justice. Which, I mean, and that's, obviously, I do not agree with this, and I think it is bad theology. But still, the intersectional challenge remains very much in my mind, because I am aware that a few decades ago, feminist theology understood itself as speaking for every woman on the planet, while it was done by Northern American white women. And even me, who is in the kind of continuum of culture to those women, feel some intercontextual friction, and and only as this gained momentum, women of other traditions spoke up and said, "Hey, women are diverse, and no woman can speak for all women," which I think is quite salient and relevant for today's discussion too, because speaking about raising the women's voice in the public does not mean that there is just this one idea of their woman, or that we are one group that is harmonious and has one perspective. But I do think that women, and today's discussion gives me the impression, even maybe worldwide, share certain aspects of being discriminated against. And this is, of course, it's nothing, in some sense, it has nothing to do with us, because the discrimination is always the problem of those who discriminate against you, not something that is attached to my own being as a woman. But still, it forms a bond in some way. When I hear you, Orsi, speaking about the upper echelons and the Asian church context, I mean, I immediately feel connected, even though the contexts are so diverse and there are many layers of difference between us. But at the same time, I think we should not allow ourselves be robbed of this companionship. To forge something positive out of a shared awareness of being discriminated against. I mean, sorry, it's not my first language, so it comes out quite radical when I say it this way, and it shocks me in a way, but I think this is also something that I thought about my relationship to tradition, which is predominantly or wholly male. I want to claim it as my own tradition, but not ignore the oppressive use and effect it has had. So that was not a very precise answer to your question.
But I mean, that is what Hoyce talked about, you know, we don't just give a simple yes and no to these complexities. I think the point we want today is to just raise the awareness of different issues, and we can't solve everything in a 1 hour, 15-minute webinar, but at least we can highlight the key issues. And actually there was someone who actually raised a question, and maybe this is how people may listen, respond. You know, is it just sufficient to have women in top levels of leadership? Is it? No, I'm sure you have heard this before. Are there other areas in which they're engaged in doing public theology? But at the same time, there's a tension in this discussion, because implicit in that question may be a question of power, of who is asking that question or who may respond. Now, I'm just opening up to anyone to respond to that. Is it enough? Hoyce, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the issue is not to have women in the top power only. And myself also, I always say, we don't really need just a woman to be there. We need someone who can lead. And I'm sure there are powerful women who can be on top. But the structures in the church, the cultural background, they don't allow them. There are many women who are good leaders, even than the men who are leading, but they are not given chance. So it's not just to be on top, it's just to have a talent, to be able to lead, and then the society to be flexible, that anyone, be it a woman, be it a man, can be given that chair to sit there and lead the society. So that is the concern. It's not just to push that women, they should be on top. You can put someone who is not talented in that way, and it will backfire the society. So I think it's just a matter of being flexible, a matter of being able to say anyone who is called for this position can be given, and the qualification can be looked at, and then someone can be offered that position. So for me, I don't really, there was time even I was speaking about these special cities in, for instance, in my context, in Tanzania, the member of the parliament, you find, women are given special cities. They will just be allowed to go to the parliament, and you can feel that some of them, they are really not doing anything there. They are just sitting there listening. They don't argue, they don't have any ability to analyze things critically. And it's just to fill the position that we have 10 women and 10 men, but is that really what we need? We need people who are called for those positions.
So there's this question about structures, right, that you mentioned. It's not just about putting a woman in order to fulfill a quota, right? So you're raising a more deeper issue about for us to self-reflect. And I guess, Ozzy, you wanted to say something because this is something close that you brought up in your presentation.
I did mention that I think that actually both genders, I think I did mention, although I talked a lot about the fact that there are very few women in the top echelon, but I did mention that for me, working with my chairman, that there is, you know, gender equality in the leadership for my section is very good. And I enjoy that. And I think that is good. The other thing is that I have a student who came through the seminary, and she was someone who, I mean, she is someone who is very desired, very much a pastor that her congregation really wants her to go back to them in a very, very rural area, but they were so blessed by her. So the whole entire congregation, including all the men, all the elders within, you know, the elders within the church, want her back as the pastor of that church. You know, that means that her ability is what they prize, her skills, you know, and her compassion, maybe, her abilities, her talents, her gifts. This is what they want. And I like what Hoyce said about being flexible. I think it's true. I think that, no, it doesn't work if we just say, okay, 50% has to be women in the top echelon. It has to be flexible. But I think that, you know, we need also to, as someone said in the chat, we need to build up our women. We need to have women built up in leadership from lower levels, from earlier on, so that, you know, when you come up, then you get a chance to show your gifts and show your talents, that you are able to sit on the top echelons of the church or of public theology, like us, you know, representing all our different churches and our different seminaries. I think that's very key. And the funny thing about my church is recently, it's only in the recent years, okay, that means within the last, I think it's 5 years, maybe less than that, we have paternity leave. Like, it's okay for a pastor if she's a lady to have maternity leave, but for her husband to have, who's also a pastor, or for a male pastor to have paternity leave, he only gets 7 days, but at least he has 7 days, whereas before he had no days. Which is like a telling thing, which is, you know, certain things have to change.
Eva, go ahead. And this is a free discussion for three of you. Go ahead.
I think this both resonates very much with me. And I think back to what Hoyce said about the love of power. Because I think, like, I think you said building up the people or the women for leadership positions is one side, but the other side is whether they will be accepted and whether they will be allowed to use their gifts for leadership. And I think this is a more structural issue, which is so difficult. This is, in my context, I think this is the major challenge, because women work as pastors already in a certain leadership position. But it is kind of strange how it is restricted, or maybe one could work with, I think in the comments somebody said the wall of gender or something, or the glass ceiling, maybe, of course, this expression, I think it's also in English. So the expectations towards a woman and overcoming those expectations, it's quite a challenge, I think.
I'm just curious whether we can take it to a slightly different direction now, and maybe making it a little bit more personal as well. I mean, the personal is political in a sense. I was wondering if three of you could share who would be a woman theologian that has inspired you, especially not just first in doing theology, but also in doing theology that addresses public issues or different versions of public theology. and they may be someone in history or someone that's more contemporary. And why or how have they inspired you? Perhaps that also helps to just put this in concrete form. What does it look like, especially in the way that they have impacted not just the church, but society? I mean, there are comments that mentioned that there were some women doing public theology outside of the church walls. And there are probably reasons why that is the case, or their calling. But I'm curious to hear from you. And maybe we can start with Hoyce, because I'm sure that we talked a little bit about it earlier. And that's important to think about who inspired you and who continues to inspire you.
Yes, thank you very much, Sivin. There are a lot of women, but I will mention maybe the first one who inspired me. I will mention her name is Reverend Joslin Jama. This woman is just a powerful, is just a wonderful one. She is from the Lutheran Church in Tanzania and in the northern diocese where I originally come from, in the region of Kilimanjaro. It's just a story. I will just shorten it. There was time in our church, we were celebrating 100 years jubilee of our church since the first missionary came to our church. And by then I was just a schoolgirl. I attended this mass. It was a really very big crowd. And I was not used to hear a voice of woman in those big crowd and in the church. So I attended to this, and then to my surprise, I heard a voice of woman. She was just speaking slowly and could be understood very clearly. And she was reading a text from the Bible. And this one was really something which impressed me. And I was thinking, oh, so women can stand before all these people and in the midst of men, and can speak so nicely and so clearly to the crowd. So this gave me a confidence. And I remember I just say, God, I want one day to be like this woman, to be able to stand before people and share about your word. So in short, I can say this woman inspired me a lot, just to read a biblical text before the crowd. That was something very big to me, and something which has make me to decide, no, I want to, so I think I can do that. But there are other women, like what I wrote an article a few days ago about Kimpa Vita in Congo. She was the first woman who was able to address her community about the unjust practice of the church, Roman Catholic by then, and the colonial power that they have taken the kingdom of Congo from the Congolese, that the missionary, they have replaced their charm with the images and things like that. She was at the end, she was murdered, but she was able to criticize what she thought, this is not right, this is not good, we are discriminated against by the colonial power, and also by the church, which was replacing the African traditional religion. So she used the Bible to explain how God can also be God of the Black people, and not only through the white people, but he can also work directly with the Black people in Congo. And she was considered a very dangerous thinker. They just killed her, but her ideas are still alive. And she's among the women who can be mentioned in the history of church in Africa and the history of Africa.
Thank you, Hoyce. This is so moving and so powerful, because we are not just talking about something in the ivory tower. There is a cost involved in speaking out. There's a price to pay, and this is just very inspiring and moving. And I can see the participants actually listing down those names of theologians. And I invite you to send it to all panelists and attendees so everyone can know who are the names. It is almost like a collection of different names, different people who have inspired us. And this is one side of it, definitely. And we're hearing this, but we'll come back to issues of structure later. But it's good to just pause for a moment and just to think about the women that God has called, that has inspired you. Eva, over to you, or Ozzy, whoever wants to go first. Eva, maybe, yeah.
Well, then I would say Antje Jacqueline, who is the Archbishop of Sweden. I had the honor to meet her a few times, and I remember, I mean, I knew of her, and I had seen pictures, but I remember meeting her and thinking, this is possible, yeah? Because she fills the role of an archbishop with Selbstverständlichkeit. It's kind of obvious and self-evident that she's the archbishop, and there's no discussion necessary. And this for me it was unthinkable, because being a woman in this kind of position always seemed to me an inner contradiction. But there she was, as a systematic theologian and Archbishop of Sweden, and all the while quite relaxed about it, but still feeling this authority and taking her responsibility, and also her responsibility as a woman. I mean, it's always obvious that she's a woman, and she. It's not like sometimes I experience people somehow donning like a cloak a masculine role, which a woman can never fill, because there's the obvious disparity. But that's not what she does. And then I remember Googling her and finding a picture of her inauguration, and there she was in the full regalia, which looked Catholic to me as an Austrian Protestant in a Catholic environment. There she was in all this priest garments, very beautiful and white, and even with a mitra. And I remember seeing her and thinking, yes, why not? Of course. With the staff, I mean, yeah, and that's, I mean, in a sense, it's ironic, because I'm a very theology-driven person, but still, this image and the person opens something. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to come in, if allowed.
Sure, and then we'll go back to Ozzy. Yeah, go ahead.
I just to echo what Eva is saying about clothes. You know, it's very impressive that people also, they look at the clothes. I remember in one of our dioceses, they were not women, they were thinking of this clerical shirt. How can a woman wear this clerical shirt if we allow women to be ordained? So it was like, even to wear this clerical shirt is not really something for women. And I remember addressing one of the synod in one of the dioceses, which they were not allowing women to be ordained. When they saw me in a clerical shirt, they were surprised. So you can look good in this clerical shirt. And at the end of this synod, I remember they allowed women to be ordained. They said there is nothing which can hinder us from ordained women. So I think there are very small issues which people sometimes they use to just think that women cannot do that.
That's right, because it's a public statement of what we wear. So, and of course, how we portray ourselves in the public. And I know that there are friends who are participating from other faith communities that are joining us too, maybe listening into how we are reflecting about these matters. Ozzy, over to you. Who inspires you?
I thought about it and listed 3 people. Katharina von Bora, or Katharina Luther, the former bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Hong Kong, former Bishop Josephine. She was the first lady bishop that I had ever met at a conference. And so I was like, whoa, this is Bishop Josephine, you know. And the 3rd person who inspired me is my supervisor for my MTH thesis, Dr. Carolyn Schneider. So these 3 women. So like Katharina von Bora was just a very normal, you know, she was the wife of Luther, right? Martin Luther. But she was like, you know, you read what she says, you read the table talks, but you have to read the things that Katharina says. And they're amazing things, you know. She did theology publicly. And of course, you know, former Bishop Josephine is just being her in her position and who she is. It's like, whoa, you know. And then Dr. Carolyn really inspired me because she was such a great theologian and such a good teacher, and yet someone who writes really interesting books and yet has a very interesting thought processes, let's put it that way, you know. When you have your supervisor talk to you about, you know, oh, your thesis is going like this or not like this or whatever, it's really, really inspiring.
Thank you. Now, I think let's have a little pause for a moment, and just to let you collect yourself. I think it's really inspiring how the participants are so engaged in the chat, giving their opinions and talking. I think some of them are asking Hoyce for the names of those that you mentioned, that you can type it in so that others can benefit, so that we can have a starting point. I will be calling in Angela just to come in and to invite her to say maybe some words in to share what are some insights, and she'll be sharing in Spanish first. Then afterwards, we'll figure out a way to cut and paste some of her thoughts in English for the benefit of others. But she can mix it up with English and Spanish. It's up to you, Angela. But the main thing I'm asking is, when you're hearing these insights from our speakers today, and as well as the chat, what is some main thoughts that you have, reflections, and maybe a call to action for us? Over to you, Angela.
Muchas gracias. A partir de las presentaciones de mis compañeras, podemos observar que la teología pública debe tener un eje transversal de género, porque en la práctica ya lo hacemos. La lucha por nuestros derechos constantemente nos coloca en un espacio público, y desde nuestros espacios religiosos trabajamos una contextualización de los quehaceres diarios. Hoy nuestras voces se sistematizan para que estas reflexiones queden expuestas y sean una voz que invite al cambio. Muchas gracias y felicidades.
Thank you, Angela. And I think she will type it in for us because my Spanish is severely limited and I will need to improve on that. But I'd like to hear also from others, from our panelists, our speakers. What is one thing that what insight that you have gained in this discussion? And maybe there's one call to action that you would like to encourage our participants for today about women doing public theology today. Of course, we talked a lot about women becoming more public in the church, which is one piece. But I guess we also wanted to direct attention to how women have engaged in public issues. And Hoyce mentioned that in her examples, and Archbishop Joslin definitely, as well as Auzi, you mentioned it too. So anyone who would like to go first? Your final comments of challenge to us and encouragement.
I'll go first. What I can take away from this, and it's really interesting, is that women are valuable. And the contribution of women on all levels in public theology is very valuable. And that without women's voices in public theology, we will lose out a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Hoyce, over to you. And the last one can be Eva.
Yeah, so I would like to say women are talented in many ways. If given chance, they can do wonders. And I would like also to urge the women who are in the position and those who are working maybe in the theological college to try to give out their voice for women, to empower women who are in the margin. So anyone who has got power and is a woman should not just think it's just automatic. There are some contexts where women, they really need to be empowered and encouraged so that they can exercise, they can use their gift. There are a lot of gifts which are just buried out there. So we need to go to the grassroots and try to empower women who are ready to do theology and especially to speak in the public about Christ, actually, to share the gospel. And I hope women, if well educated and well prepared, they can really help. I don't say that men cannot, but they can do wonders. And I want also to thank you, Sivin, and all men who are supporting the work of women around the globe. We really appreciate those men who are behind us and who believe that women can do something. I really appreciate your effort, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hoyce, for your comments and appreciation. Eva, some words, closing words of wisdom for us. You started, and it might be nice to have you close.
But I take away an experience that it is strengthening to share amongst women. It has been strengthening to share with the panelists and also with the people in the chat. And this is something I would like to take with me into my context and look more into to find a solidarity and strengthening out of this. And also, I would like to quote somebody from the chat, Faith Lugazia. Sorry if I pronounce your name not correctly, but she said, and it was following from a thought that Hoyce and Ozzy developed, that it is also about taking responsibility. To take responsibility is the first step, to raise one's voice in the public. To not be pushed to do it, to not be fostered into doing it, to not do it because you want to be harmonious with your mentor who is a man, but just to think about, do I want to take responsibility, and which responsibility do I take, and which is realistic. So that has got me thinking, if I may say so.
Thank you so much and I'd like to just at least to bring back Angela back to our fold so that we can see her. I just wanted to thank you once again, all of you, Eva, Hoyce, Ozzy, Angela, for sharing with us what it means for women to be doing public theology today. Of course, I think the word doing is really intentional in our title, and we try to model some of that here in our discussion. And of course, public theology needs to be understood as in the context of an action performed and expressed in the public sphere. I know that there may be many women who are actually performing it, maybe not necessarily speaking it, but actually already doing it in their respective spheres. And it will be good to acknowledge that and just to affirm that. And I believe that public theology is not only just at the grassroots, but going to all different levels, whether it's the highest echelons of leadership or in different levels. And we want to just value their gifts that they have given to the church. And of course, I think during this Holy Week, it is just appropriate for us to pause and to remind ourselves how we are proclaiming the gospel as a public truth. And this is embodied in your words. Thank you. and also in your insights, the theologies that you are articulating today. And I learned something from an article that said public theology is about listening as much as speaking. And for me today, I'm practicing what listening means. So we are thankful that we could lift up the women's perspectives, and we want to, I believe it empowers us to be in partnership together to deepen our own contributions. And of course, public theology is really about bringing God's presence into the public sphere for the common good. And we can't do that alone, separated, and we need the participation and leadership of all of God's gifts given to us. So thank you so much for this time. I want to thank all the participants as well. Please continue with the chat and just share with us what is one insight that you have received from today's panel. And also, very important, what is one action that you feel called to do for yourself? And perhaps a prayer that you would offer, especially during this season. And we remember very much the church in Myanmar, the churches in Indonesia. We know that in recent times. And of course, the churches around the world that is impacted by COVID-19 in such a difficult way. So would you still want to say one word to the participants? Maybe just one word that you want to say to all, and say it in the language of your heart as we say goodbye. And I will just invite all of you to unmute yourself, ladies, to say just one. You have given us your sentence and paragraphs. Maybe you can give us one word, or even sing us a song. Miriam's echo. What is that one word that you would like to offer? Hoyce.
Okay. One in different language. Asanteni sana. Thank you very much. Natotela sana. Grazie.
Thank you, Hoyce. Oh, Ozzy. Or Eva.
I'm very bad at this.
Eva, then. I'm putting you on the spot. Eva.
Sola gratia. Sola gratia, I would say.
Sola, grace alone. Thank you. Angela.
Cantar es esperanza. The song is our hope.
The song is our hope. I like that. And Ozzy, back to you.
Back to me. Oh, Christ Jesus.
All right. So with that, thank you very much, all of you who have participated. We will be emailing all the participants some of the insights that they've given. I'll compile it for you. The recording will be made available, and we will have an article, probably not this week because the focus is on Holy Week. It will be next week or so. We will have an article that summarizes our discussion. And once again, thank you very much for joining us. So goodbye, everyone, and we will see you again in the next public webinar.